Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for the new moon in Cancer, which is on the 23rd of June, and it is at 2 degrees of Cancer. So I'm calling this new moon Find Your Tribe because Cancer rules the 4th house of home and family, and Cancer is also the sign of the mother. So that nurturing that we look for in our personal relationships that makes us feel like we belong is what Cancer is all about. And yet, look at it. You know, some people don't have that kind of family of origin. Sometimes you don't feel like you belong in your family of origin. And so that's why there is that saying, find your tribe, because the people that you belong to may not have the same DNA as you do. And as long as you can just be okay with that, you'll be fine. But there are some people who cling to this notion of genetic, having genetics in common, and it ends up making them miserable. And I think that if you have a prominent Cancer in your chart, like for instance the sun, the moon, maybe the rising sign, Mercury, Venus, or Mars, or any combination thereof, you may feel it the most, and same with the other water signs and the earth signs even, because these are feminine signs. They tend to be more, I would say, home-oriented, family-oriented, and traditional. And everyone always touts the family as being the end-all, be-all of our lives. And yet some people do not have that from the moment they're born. They are adopted, and so they are not raised with their birth parents. Or they may be living in a group home where they don't have any parents. And our society just assumes that everybody grows up with two-parent families, and it's like, leave it to Beaver, and it's not. And so this can be very painful. I'm recording this video a couple of days before Father's Day, and there are a lot of people out there who don't know who their fathers are, who have never met them, or their fathers are not in their lives. Maybe their fathers abandoned the family and things like that. And I think of Dr. Wayne Dyer, who was a big proponent of positive thinking and law of attraction, and he passed a couple of years ago. I'm sure many of you are familiar with him. And he had his father abandon his family to the point where, it affected him so much so that he had to be put into an orphanage, or like a group home when he was a child, and his mother couldn't take care of him at that time. And so he had to learn how to forgive his father for abandoning the family. Okay. And here's a guy who became someone who helped other people to think in a constructive way, in a way that attracts good to them. And yet he had that background himself. And so I say this because there's a lot of Cancer energy at the time of this new moon. You have the sun in Cancer, the moon in Cancer, which always happens. The sun and moon are in conjunction. You have Mercury in Cancer, and you have Mars in Cancer. So with all this Cancer energy, there is going to be, possibly for many of you, a feeling of nostalgia, because Cancer loves the past. And I think the Six of Cups may connect with Cancer. It's definitely that feeling of, good memories from the past. But sometimes that can bring melancholy because you realize that the past is gone. So you may be having mixed feelings where you're thinking about things that used to be and then realizing that they no longer are like that. And you have to be able to reconcile that. And there's a lot of emotional energy in this new moon, you know, which almost seems like more like a full moon in that sense. But what's kind of a saving grace is that there's going to be some energy that with the aspects, there, you know, the sun makes a conjunction to Mercury and the moon makes a conjunction to Mercury. Now, it isn't Cancer, but still, with that connection to Mercury, there is also the ability to think logically and to maybe put things in their proper perspective and not get carried away with your emotions, which can be good. At the time of this new moon, Venus is in Taurus, and as I said, Mars is in Cancer. So Venus and Mars are in harmonious aspect, a sextile, and in general, I would say that there is a lot of thought of what home means and the new beginnings with home. For some people, it may be a situation where you've been clinging too much to the past, maybe where you live is stuck in the past in terms of maybe you're done with an area, so to speak, and it's time to move on. But you may be afraid of change. And who knows, though? You never know if you will find a group of people, like-minded people, if you were to move to a new location. Maybe where you are living right now is not supportive of the way that you feel like living. You know, that does happen quite a bit, where you just don't jibe with the general population where you are. And that's why I said find your tribe. So I'm going to be picking cards from my typical Morgan Greer deck. I'm going to pick one of those cards. I'm going to be picking one from this new deck that I just got called the Rumi Oracle deck. And this is kind of like about kind of emotional or love related situations. And I will also be picking cards from the Ascended Masters deck and the Native Spirit deck. Oh, and the Keeper of the Light Oracle deck. I think I might actually do this reading in 2 parts, just because I think I'm going to just like lay out the other cards in a separate, you know, because I can't pause this, and it's too hard to like set everything up. I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but because of the having to look at the booklet and all that stuff, I'd rather just lay the cards out before I film, which I should have done already, but what can I say? So I'm just going to pick, maybe I'll pick one from my traditional Rider-Waite deck, along with one from this Morgan Greer deck. So I'm just cutting these cards, and I'm going to pick this one. Okay, this is perfect. This is so perfect. I'll tell you why in 1 second. And then here's my, well, this is that typical Rider-Waite deck. Picking one card from this one, and I pick, okay, very interesting. Okay, so in the first part of this reading, I'm just going to talk about these 2 cards. And then I will do a second one with the oracles. Okay, so the Empress card is connected to Venus, and by extension, that is Taurus and Libra. Now, I said that Venus is in Taurus, so I didn't mention this before, but when Venus is in Taurus, and this could also be if you have your Venus in Taurus in your natal chart, it would be the same thing, that it's a very indulgent Venus. Venus is already the ruler of Taurus, and Venus loves pleasure, and it loves luxury. So you may feel very sensual at the time of this new moon. You may be feeling a sense of abundance, which this card represents. It's also can be the card of conceiving a child. It's the card of the mother, so that's perfect for Cancer as well. There may be all these feelings kind of floating around about nurturing. What does it mean to nurture someone or something? Because it could be nurturing a pet. Some people would rather raise fur babies than human babies. And yet how many people feel pressured to have children? Because of, once again, their families wanting that for them. And the other thing that I would say too is, do you nurture yourself? Do you treat yourself? I'm not talking about an excuse to be abusive to yourself in terms of eating foods that ultimately hurt you, or doing activities that are not necessarily the best thing to do on a regular basis. But maybe sometimes people are too withholding of allowing themselves to feel pleasure. The idea of sensuality and pleasure is, in the chakra system, is the second chakra. And so you have the first chakra, which is survival, and then the second chakra is sensation and pleasure. And the interesting thing about that, if you think about it, is if you are trying to survive, you don't have the luxury of looking for pleasure. All you can do is, it's like life or death, okay? But some people live in that mentality even when they don't have to. And they have a hard time allowing themselves to experience pleasurable things. Sometimes they even bypass the second chakra and go straight to the third one, which is power. And they try to live out their desires through attaining power over themselves and others. And that can sometimes lead to withholding pleasure from themselves as a way of maybe exerting power. So an eating disorder like anorexia can happen when somebody deprives themselves of the pleasure of eating, and in order to kind of exercise their willpower because they feel out of control internally. So, you know, food isn't just, you know, somebody in the first chakra is just interested in food for being able to stay alive. But once you have already solved that problem, food can become a pleasurable activity. Of course, everything that you do that's pleasurable has the other part of that, which can be, unfortunately, self-indulgent. And so with Venus and Taurus, there always has to be the understanding that when you love someone, they cannot be your possession, and you cannot treat them as an object that you use for your pleasure, whether it's sexually for any kind of monetary gain or whatever. And that means that both genders can be guilty of this, you know. So it's kind of like nurturing yourself without overindulging yourself. That is the challenge with Venus and Taurus, okay? And the other card that I got was the King of Swords. The King of Swords is somebody who is very in control intellectually, where their thoughts are in a place that serve them rather than they being led by their thoughts. The one criticism of people who represent the King of Swords is that they can be rather I could say too detached, to the point where they are out of touch with feelings altogether. So the swords connect to the air signs, and those are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. it's interesting too because it's Father's Day, and the king can represent the father. And so perhaps for some people, if you had a father that you felt did not share their affection with you, maybe you had a father who was kind of remote and tight-lipped about their feelings, it can lead a person to seek out that sort of affirmation. And I'm thinking specifically of women, but you know, it could be a boy towards their father, you know, seeking it out with other males, in terms of like the friends that they choose, the associates they choose, but that kind of wanting that emotional connection and not getting it, and getting a lot of logic but not a lot of love. Maybe that leads some people to compulsive behavior that is trying to nurture oneself, but it's going about it all the wrong way. But in a good sense, you could say that the King of Swords is somebody who is not allowing themselves to be overly sentimental. And this is because being sentimental can sometimes keep people trapped in the past and kind of longing for the good old days, when actually they may be idealizing the past. It may never have been the way they thought it was. But that distance of time has created this sense of this Shangri-La, so to speak, you know, that they had. And it's very interesting that I picked these two cards because they really speak to different sides of us. The part of us that tries to be very logical, linear, and the part of us that loves things that are of nature, that are not related to, you know, any kind of formula, mathematical formula. Creativity is represented by the Empress. Things like that, which we would call right brain activities. And just anything related to love, you know, anything related to nurturing others, nurturing ourselves. So anyway, this is part 1, and I will be putting up the oracle cards next. Bye, you guys.